Assalamu alaikum, my friends. How much have you thought about the first chapter in the Quran? It's called Al-Fatiha, or the key. And it's a very, very unique chapter. It doesn't resemble any other chapter in the Holy Text. And the only way I can describe this chapter is that it resembles a national anthem or a recital of allegiance or an oath of allegiance. And I had a look at several anthems, national anthems, and I tried to see what national anthems really looked like. And I also looked at one oath of allegiance, which is a big deal, the American oath of allegiance. And I tried to compare Fatiha, and what I find is that Surah Fatiha, or the opening chapter or the key of the Quran, is very much similar to those anthems and oath of allegiance of the US. And so let me show you some oaths of allegiance, or the oath of allegiance of the US, and let me show you some anthems also. And you see how beautiful, how amazingly the first chapter, Surah Al-Fatiha, how amazingly it actually appears superior to all of the others, and how it actually encapsulates and very succinctly summarizes the ethos, the idea of the Quran and the idea of Islam. So let me just share with you first of all. Look, the idea of anthems and oaths of allegiance. What I find when I looked at 3 or 4 of them was that they generally possess 3 important components. The first component I've shown there in red is that it generally amounts to a form of yielding, so surrendering or granting of authority or ceding of authority, personal authority, to a greater power or greater authority, right? So that's the first thing. But included in that is also the idea of an oath. So it is a social contract. It is taking a position vis-a-vis that authority which was granted or established. And then the next, also part of it would be a call, you see, a rally cry. So that would be the common feature that I see, the first type of common feature within normal oaths of allegiance or anthems, national anthems. Then a very common second aspect of anthems would be the prayer. So there would generally in anthems be a prayer. That's in purple. And then the third one, many anthems also contain some imagery. So it sketches the world or the geography or the context within which the prayer is made. So, for example, the Chinese anthem would sketch the wall. It would sketch the marching of the people. The American anthem would sketch the flag and the homeland and where the flag blows. And so the South African anthem would look at the mountains and the seas. So let me show you some of the anthems. I'm not going to go through them in detail. And then you look at these anthems or oaths of allegiance. The first one is the British anthem, and entirely in purple. Entirely in purple. It looks as this, like this, and it is an entire prayer within which is included an allegiance to the king. So the prayer invokes the king and allegiance to the king, as well as allegiance to God. So that is the way the British anthem looks. And it's entirely a prayer, almost, right? With an implicit allegiance to the king within that prayer. And then that is what it looks like. I'm not going to go through it. The American anthem is almost entirely what we call an imagery. You see, the American anthem is almost entirely just imagery. So it is a patriotic call, but implicit in the imagery. So, say, can you see? And then you go through it, and then over the land of the free and the home of the brave. Oh, the last four lines really is sort of implicitly a call, but amidst the imagery of the flag and the land. And then the other one is the American oath of allegiance, which is entirely an oath, right? So that is the American oath of allegiance. Then the South African anthem, which is also the anthem of several African countries, is very interesting because it includes all three, right? Especially the anthem of South Africa that was redesigned after 1994, after which some of the white anthem or the colonial anthem, or aspects of the colonial anthem or the anthem during white rule was included. And so the African anthem is really the purple part, the traditional Southern African anthem. And it is really a prayer. It is a prayer to God. Then the green part is imagery, which sketches the land and the mountains from the blue of our skies, from the depths of our seas. And then finally, there is a rally cry, let us live and strive for freedom in South Africa, our land. So the three components are all present: the yielding, the oath, the call, the prayer, and some imagery. So that is the South African anthem. Let's just take a look at the Chinese anthem. And the Chinese anthem, very strong on two components, which is the rally cry, or the reddish part, and also imagery. So let's just look at it. The rally cry aspects would be stand up, those who refuse to be slaves. Very strong imagery there. Those who refuse to be slaves. So it has the image of the masses who are rebelling against their slavehood or this slavery. With our flesh and blood, so again the imagery of war and fighting and resistance. Let's build our newest great wall. It's obviously a cry, and then the Chinese nation is at its greatest peril. So again, imagery there. So as you can see, the Chinese anthem being replete, of very full of imagery and of a general patriotic cry. So I think we then move to the surah Fatiha, which is the one unique opening few verses of the Qur'an. And that is what it looks like. It is called the Fatiha, the Qur'an's key. And I see the three components there. So let me go with you through it, and you can see how profound and powerful the opening chapter, or the oath of allegiance, or the what we call the anthem almost of the Muslims is. It starts out, all praise is due to God. And that sets the scene, right? Lord and sustainer of all worlds. And so now the imagery moves beyond a land, beyond the sea, beyond a country, but it actually goes into all the worlds. Rabbil Alameen. And Alameen can mean all nations, or it can mean all worlds. Right? So the Alam, very similar to the English, or the English sense in which the word is used, where world can be the English world, the Arab world, the Western world, but also world can be worlds like the planet, or like, the entire universe. So world in its greatest sense would really be implied in the first few lines, the Lord and sustainer of the world. And it juxtaposes God, because the first four lines that I've got there in green are all attributes of God, are all descriptions of the one God. So it says all praise is due to God. So it starts out by calling for recognition and praising of God. And then it offers three more lines, which actually depicts or provides some attributes of that God. two of the attributes are very kind, Lord and Sustainer of all worlds. So all praise to God, Lord and Sustainer of all worlds. So that's the first descriptor there of God, is that every thing, every event, every development, whatever occurs in the universe is being sustained by the one God, possessor of all grace, Ar-Rahman. Because Ar-Rahman is not just being graceful, it is having ownership of all grace. And so Ar-Rahman means the possessor of all grace. And then a further qualification on that possession of grace is the being compassionate. So possessor of all grace, compassionate, wielder of the day of reckoning. And you know, the translations often say master of the day of judgment, owner of the day of judgment. But I don't think anyone has ever recognized that the word wield is much more appropriate here. Because if you look at the word wield, it does imply ownership or possession. But it also includes in that sense of ownership and possession the power to use that particular owned attribute. So God is not just the static owner of the day of judgment, which is in Arabic Maliki Yawmiddin, but really God is the one that wields that day. That makes that day very relevant, because if we only regard God to be the possessor or the owner of a day that is far off, then there is no immediacy for us. There's no immediate implications for us as we live now. So that sense of wielding the day of reckoning brings it closer to us, gives it immediacy. It means that whatever action I now undertake, or whatever action crime or kindness or virtue that I undertake, the day of judgment is relevant to me. There's an immediacy to that day of judgment. And so the description there that God is the Maliki Yawmiddin, is the wielder of the day of judgment, means that He is the sustainer, the nourisher, the controller, the owner of all grace, the compassionate, but also the one who wields that great day, that reckoning moment, who wields that moment of reckoning over all people, over all of us. Then that is the green, that is sketching the ambit, the extent of the power, and locates the rest of the verse of the chapter. Then it moves on to an oath, right? An oath or a cry, a rallying cry. To you and only you, Iyyaka na'budu, because Iyya is more than just na'budu, or just, anta na'budu. It says Iyyaka na'budu, which means to you and only you we remain devoted. And wa iyyaka nasta'in, the Arabic there, iyyaka means to you and from you and only you we seek support. So the idea of slavery to none other but the one supreme being, the one controller, the one sustainer, the one all compassionate, declaring only devotion to that one supreme being. That is really the part in red here, is that we admit to servitude and service and devotion to none other but the one supreme creator, sustainer, controller, who is deserving of such servitude. And so we also, from you and you only we seek support. So it is a dual undertaking and a prayer. We remain devoted to you and we seek your support. And then comes the prayer path, the 3 lines of prayer, which is extremely profound also because it transcends if you look at the British prayer, then it is very scatter our enemies and make them fall, confound their politics, frustrate their knavish tricks, on thee our hopes we fix. And it speaks about saving the king. Not so the prayer in the Fatiha. In the Fatiha, the prayer is much more broad. It is much more of a broad request. Guide us towards the even path. Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. Guide us towards the even path, which is a very broad statement. But then there's 2 lines of specifics. The path of those who reap benefit from you. The path of those who reap benefit from you. Show us the even path. That path which is followed by those who reap benefit from you as the supreme divine controller of the universe. But then a very important negation in the final verse. Not of those who incur anger, nor those who are lost. So a very, very important negation in the final words. غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Not of those who incur anger, nor those who are lost. And so the even path is the path that attracts the benefits of the divine, that attracts the blessings of the divine, that attracts the tranquility, the comfort, the smoothness, the balance, the harmony, the equilibrium that comes with admitting to the supreme divine sustainer and commander and controller of the universe. That path brings benefit, it brings harmony, it brings peace, it brings security, it brings equilibrium. Not the path of those where there is anger and where there is a sense of loss and alienation and destitution and a sense of, hopelessness. So where there is hopelessness, frustration, anger, a sense of alienation, being lost, that is the path that does not attract the benefit of God. And so this important first chapter or 7 verses of the Qur'an, which Muslims are required to recite several times a day, which we recite when we enter and we start the reading of the Qur'an, which we recite at any moment when we want to declare our allegiance, are the profound words that establishes the position of God as the Lord and sustainer of the worlds, as the possessor of all grace, as the one worthy, as the one who wields final judgment. And I want you to remember that final judgment here is obviously the main meaning is that day of judgment which we are all to face inevitably, which is inevitable, that day of judgment. But I want you to also to understand إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ Maliki. I want you to understand Maliki Yawmuddin, Maliki Yawmiddin, not only as the final judgment, but any moment of judgment. Because the oppressor, the criminal, has 2 moments of judgment, both in this world and in the year after. We know that we are to impose consequences for the oppressor and for the criminal, both in this world. The judgment must come here, but judgment also comes in the year after. And we know that God presides and owns and wields both of those judgment days. The judgment day that is on earth, the judgment day of the murderer, of the oppressor, of the criminal here, which we are instructed to hold people accountable, as well as that supreme judgment day, which is to follow in the yaft. And we ask and we acknowledge here in this first 4 lines here that God is the wielder of reckoning. And reckoning is an important aspect of the universe. There is no peace, there is no tranquility, there is no equilibrium, there is no justice without there being a sense of reckoning. And so this then, my dear friends, is the profound anthem of the Muslim, the profound and deep, broad sense, oath of allegiance to God, is the profound rally cry of the Muslim, of the mu'min, that we should be aware of. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.